Most people think July is when the gardening season is starting to wind down. They pull out tired, aging plants, harvest the last of their summer vegetables, and start waiting for next spring. But if you are doing the same thing, you may be missing one of the most valuable planting windows of the entire year. Because while many people believe the garden has already done its job, experienced gardeners know something completely different. July is not the end. It is actually the beginning of the best harvest season of the year. Why? Because seeds planted into the warm soil of July germinate incredibly fast. Then, when fall arrives and temperatures begin to drop, that is when the real magic happens. Many vegetables naturally convert starches into sugars to protect themselves from the cold. Carrots become sweeter. Kale loses its bitterness. Cabbage becomes crisper and tighter. Brussels sprouts go from slightly strong tasting to nutty, rich, and naturally sweet. Some vegetables do not just tolerate frost. Those first frosts are exactly what help them reach their best flavor. While your neighbors have already put away their gardening tools and decided the season is over, your garden can still keep producing, not just until the end of fall. With some crops, you can still harvest even after the first snow begins to fall. In today's video, I'm going to share 12 of the best vegetables to plant in July. Some of them can give you a harvest in just a few weeks. Some are planted now specifically so they can reach their best quality in fall. And some vegetables become sweeter the colder the weather gets. If you've ever thought July was too late to start a productive garden, this video is about to change the way you look at the second half of the growing season. Let's get started. 1. Beans. The crop that can keep producing all season long. Beans may be one of the most misunderstood vegetables to plant in July. Most people sow them once in spring. They get one big harvest, and then it is over. But experienced gardeners do not treat beans that way. They see beans as a crop that can be planted again and again. About every 7 to 10 days, they sow another short row. That simple method creates a continuous harvest cycle instead of having everything mature at the same time. You will always have young, crisp, fresh pods to pick, right up until the first frost arrives. And here is the interesting part. July is actually one of the best times for beans to grow. Unlike many other vegetables, beans love warm soil. The warmer the soil is within the right range, the faster the seeds germinate. Beans planted in spring often take a long time to push through cold soil, but beans planted in July can almost seem to jump out of the ground in a short time. However, there is one very important trick that many people do not know. In midsummer, the top layer of soil dries out very quickly under the sun. If you plant the seeds too shallow, they can lose moisture before they have a chance to germinate. Instead, plant them about 2 inches deep. At that depth, the soil holds moisture more steadily. The seeds will have enough water to germinate quickly and grow strong. If you want to grow pole beans, Blue Lake is a very reliable choice. If you prefer bush beans, you can choose Jade, Top Crop, or Strike. Most of these varieties begin producing in about 45 to 65 days. That is early enough to finish the crop before the weather turns truly cold. There is just one thing you need to remember. Beans have almost no frost tolerance. Just one early cold snap can end the entire planting. So find your average first frost date, then count back about 65 days. That is the latest point to sow your final planting of beans for the year. If you do it correctly, you will not just get one harvest. You will have fresh beans for weeks, right when many other gardens are already starting to run out of green crop. 2. Cucumbers, a second chance for a crop that failed. If your early cucumbers were attacked by beetles, hit by wilt, or simply grew weak and faded away, July gives you a chance to start over. And sometimes that second planting can be even better than the first. The reason is that many of the strongest waves of pests and diseases often attack the cucumbers planted early in spring. By midsummer, that pressure has often eased somewhat. When you sow a fresh planting of cucumbers in July, the plants start in warm, clean soil and grow very quickly. With direct seeding, many cucumber varieties can begin producing in about 50 to 60 days. If your garden is short on space, choose bush variety. They stay compact, are easier to manage, and can still produce well. If you have a trellis, vining cucumbers are a very good choice. The fruits hang off the trellis, stay cleaner, grow straighter, are easier to see, and are easier to pick. But there is one thing that determines the entire flavor of cucumber: water. Cucumbers have large leaves, and those large leaves lose moisture very quickly on hot days. When the plant dries out while it is forming fruit, the cucumbers can easily turn bitter. That bitterness is not bad luck. It is a sign that the plant was short on water at a critical moment. So if you grow cucumbers in July, water deeply and keep the moisture very consistent. Do not just wet the surface and let the soil dry out again right afterward. What the plant needs is steady moisture around the root zone, especially during flowering and fruit formation. If you want cucumbers for pickling, homemade pickles is a very good variety. If you want cucumbers for fresh eating, Sumter or Dasher to Second are reliable choices. And if space is limited, bush crop can give you a neater, more compact cucumber planting. The most important thing to remember with July cucumbers is this. The plants grow fast, but they also react very quickly to water stress. If they dry out badly even once while they are carrying fruit, you may taste it in every cucumber. Keep the moisture steady, harvest often, and this second cucumber planting may become one of the most rewarding harvests of late summer. 3. Zucchini. One plant can produce more than you expect. If there is one crop famous for producing almost too much, it is zucchini. Plant just 1 or 2 plants. Before long, you may have so much zucchini that you are giving it to neighbors, friends, or looking for every possible way to cook it. But here is the real reason July is such a good time to plant zucchini. By midsummer, many squash plants planted earlier in the season are already starting to weaken. Some are covered in the white coating of powdery mildew. Others have been attacked by squash vine borer. That pest can tunnel into the stem, cutting off the flow of water and nutrient. One day the plant still looks green and healthy. The next day, the entire plant can wilt and collapse. A fresh July planting helps you move past that first major wave of pest damage. The soil is still warm enough for the plants to root quickly. In about 50 to 60 days, the first fruits can be ready to harvest, and the plant will keep producing until truly cold weather arrives. However, that does not mean you can forget about the plant after planting. By late summer, another enemy begins to show up. Powdery mildew. This white fungal coating spreads quickly in warm, humid conditions, and zucchini is one of the crops most likely to be affected. Fortunately, you can reduce the problem with one very simple step. Do not plant the plants too close together. Give them a little more space so air can move easily between the leaves. When leaves dry quickly after rain or watering, mildew has a much harder time spreading. Many people think planting closely helps them make better use of space. But with zucchini, crowding often brings disease earlier and reduces the total harvest. If you want a dependable green zucchini, Black Beauty is a classic choice. If you prefer yellow squash, early summer crookneck is a variety many gardeners have grown successfully. And if you are tired of those small prickles on the stem scratching your arms every time you harvest, Spineless Beauty is worth considering because the stems are almost thornless. Do not wait until the fruits get huge before picking them. Harvest while they are still young. Smaller fruits are more tender, sweeter, and have fewer seeds. Each time you pick them, you also encourage the plant to produce more flowers and more fruit. With zucchini, the more consistently you harvest, the more the plant tends to produce. That is also the secret that allows just a few plants to provide enough squash for a family for weeks. 4. Carrots, the vegetable you only truly understand after the first frost. If you have only eaten carrots harvested in summer, you may not yet know what their best flavor is like. Carrots do not reach their peak flavor during hot, sunny days. They reach it after the weather begins to cool. That is why so many gardeners always set aside a bed of carrots to sow in July. When planted at this time, the plants use the still warm soil to build roots quickly. Then, when the cool days of fall arrive, the interesting part begins. To protect itself from low temperatures, the plant converts more of the starch in its roots into natural sugars. The result is that carrots harvested in late fall are often much sweeter, deeper in flavor, and crisper than carrots harvested in midsummer. That is not just a feeling. It is a natural biological response from the plant. However, growing carrots in mid-July does come with one challenge many people run into: germination. Carrot seeds are very small. The seedlings are also quite delicate. Meanwhile, the top layer of soil in midsummer can dry out after only a few hours of sun. If that layer dries out even once before the seeds germinate, the entire row may come up very thinly or not come up at all. There is a simple but extremely effective trick. After sowing the seeds, cover the bed with about 2 inches of dry straw. That straw helps hold moisture, cool the soil surface, and keep the sun from drying out the seeds. Once the seedlings begin to emerge, gently pull the straw back to the side. Another small trick is also worth using. Mix the carrot seeds with a little dry sand before sowing. This helps distribute the tiny seeds more evenly and prevents too many plants from sprouting on top of each other, which means less thinning later. Once the seedlings are up, thin them so each plant is about 1 inch apart. That spacing gives the roots enough room to grow straight and even. If you want a variety known for sweetness, Nantes is always a top choice. If you like small carrots that can be harvested early, Little Fingers is a good fit. And if you want long, attractive, meaty roots, Tender Sweet is a variety worth considering. The best thing about planting carrots in July is that you do not need to rush the harvest. The roots can stay in the ground through the first light frosts. And in many cases, the longer they stay a little longer, the sweeter they become. That is why experienced gardeners often say the best carrot is not the biggest carrot. It is the carrot that has been chilled by fall at exactly the right time. 5. Kale, the colder it gets, the better it tastes. Most vegetables are afraid of frost, but kale is the complete opposite. It is one of the few leafy greens where the first cold spells do not reduce quality. Instead, they improve the flavor. That is why many gardeners do not rush to sow kale in early spring. They wait until mid-July. That way, the plants grow during the remaining warm days. Then they mature just as temperatures begin to drop. That is when kale shows its true value. When the weather turns cold, the plant begins converting the starch stored in its leaves into natural sugars to protect itself from freezing temperatures. As a result, after a few frosts, the leaves become softer, sweeter, and almost lose their bitterness completely. If you have ever tried kale in midsummer and found it a little tough, strong, or bitter, do not assume you dislike kale. There is a good chance you simply ate it at the wrong time. The ideal sowing window is from mid-July to mid-August. That gives the plant enough time to develop a strong root system before fall arrives. After that, it continues to grow well in cooler weather. Another advantage of kale is how flexible the harvest can be. If you want tender young leaves for raw eating or salads, you only need to wait about 30 to 45 days. If you prefer larger leaves for sautéing, soups, or hot dishes, let the plant keep growing longer. You do not need to harvest the whole plant at once. Just pick the older leaves from the bottom. The top will keep producing new leaves. That way, a single plant can produce for many weeks or even months. If you are looking for a reliable variety with good quality, lacinato, also known as dinosaur kale, is always a favorite. Blue curled, Scotch, and Premier are also excellent varieties, both strong growing and productive. The best thing about kale is that you almost do not have to race against time. The plant handles cold very well. Even when many other vegetables have finished for the season, kale can still stay green in the garden, and every frost that passes makes the flavor a little better. That is why so many gardeners consider kale one of the most worthwhile vegetables for the fall garden. 6. Broccoli, do not grow it for summer harvest. Grow it for fall harvest. This is a mistake many people make. They try to grow broccoli for a midsummer harvest, but broccoli has never been a crop that loves hot weather. In reality, it is a cool season vegetable. That is why July becomes the perfect time to start. It may sound a little backward. You start the plants during some of the hottest days of the year. But the goal is not to harvest right away. The goal is for the plants to mature just as the weather begins to cool down. Because cool temperatures determine the quality of broccoli. If the plant forms heads during hot days, the heads are often small, loose, more likely to taste bitter, and quick to flower. On the other hand, when the plant enters the heading stage in the cool weather of fall, the heads become tighter, denser, and much better in flavor. That is also why experienced gardeners always count backward from the expected first frost date. Usually, you should start about 10 to 12 weeks before that point, so the plant has enough time to grow. However, there is one difficulty many people face when starting broccoli in July. Broccoli seeds do not like overly hot soil. High temperatures can cause the seeds to germinate very slowly or even sit in the soil without growing at all. If your area is going through very hot days, the simplest solution is to start the seeds in trays or in a cooler place. Once the seedlings are strong enough, transplant them into the garden. This method often gives a much higher success rate than direct sowing. If you want to extend the harvest, you should also think carefully about variety. Traditional varieties usually form one large central head. After that head is harvested, the plant is almost finished. But sprouting broccoli varieties such as Parasicaba or Asperbrock are completely different. After the main head is cut, the plant keeps producing many small side shoots along the stem. You can harvest again and again for weeks. From a single plant, the total yield can be much higher. If you prefer traditional heading varieties, Green Magic, Pac-Man, and Avenger are all very stable choices. Most will begin producing in about 50 to 70 days, depending on the variety. The most important thing when growing broccoli in July is not speed. It is patience. You are planting for fall, and if the plant matures at exactly the right time in cool weather, the reward will be big, tight, crisp, sweet heads that are far better than plants forced to grow through the heat of summer. 7. Cabbage, plant once, eat all winter. There is a reason cabbage has been an essential garden crop for hundreds of years. Not just because it is easy to grow, but because very few vegetables store as well as cabbage. If you harvest firm, healthy heads in late fall, you can keep them for months. That is also why July is such a good time to start a new cabbage crop. Unlike many heat-loving vegetables, cabbage grows best when the weather begins to cool. If the plant has to form heads during hot days, many problems can appear. The heads may swell too quickly and split open, or the plant may bolt and flower before it ever forms a firm head. The result is a nearly failed crop. But when planted in July, the plants use the remaining part of summer to build leaves and roots. Then, when temperatures drop in early fall, that is when the plants begin forming tight, firm, crisp heads. Not only that, the first light frost of the season can also improve flavor. Like many other brassicas, cold weather reduces sharpness and increases the natural sugars inside the leaves. That is why cabbage harvested late in the season is often sweeter and crisper than cabbage harvested in midsummer. If you want to store cabbage for a long time after harvest, choose varieties that form firm heads. The tighter the head, the longer it will keep in store. After harvesting, keep the heads in a cool place, around 32 to 40 degrees Fahrenheit. Under the right conditions, cabbage can store for months while still holding very good quality. That is why it is often considered one of the most important vegetables in the fall garden. One harvest does not just provide food for a few meals. It can help feed you through the entire winter. If you are looking for varieties to plant at this time, Champion and Top Bunch are both very reliable choices. Just remember one thing. Do not try to make cabbage mature in hot weather. Let fall finish the job. Those cool days at the end of the season are when this vegetable reaches its best quality. 8. Beets. 1 sowing, 2 harvests. If there is one vegetable that gives you more value than you might expect, it is beets. Most people grow beets for the roots, but in reality, you get 2 harvests from a single sowing. Even when the plants are young, the tender leaves can already be picked and eaten. They are soft, nutritious, and can be used like other leafy greens. Meanwhile, the root underground continues to grow with very little impact. That is an advantage not many root crops can offer, and July is a very good time to start. The soil is still warm, helping the plants root quickly and grow strongly in the early stage. Then, when the cool days of fall arrive, the roots begin storing more natural sugars. Like carrots, beets also become sweeter as temperatures drop. That is why beets harvested late in the season often have a richer and more pleasant flavor. However, there is one thing about beet seeds that many people do not know. What you hold in your hand and call one beet seed is not actually just one seed. It is a cluster of seeds. And around that seed cluster are natural compounds that slow germination. If you sow them directly into dry midsummer soil, the plants often come up unevenly. Some spots grow very thick. Other spots stay completely empty. Fortunately, one very simple step can greatly improve germination. Soak the seeds in water for about 24 hours before sowing. This softens the outer coating and helps rinse away some of the germination inhibitors. The result is faster and more even sprouting. Once the seedlings appear, thin them so each plant is about 2 inches apart. Do not throw away the thinning. The young leaves are completely edible. If you want a stable, easy to grow variety with high quality, Detroit Dark Red is a name many gardeners choose. It is known for round roots, deep red color, sweetness, and strong performance in a fall crop. Another advantage of beets is that you do not need to rush the harvest. The plants can tolerate light frosts while still holding very good quality. In fact, just like many other root crops, the cold can make the roots taste sweeter. Sometimes, changing the planting time by just a few weeks can give you beets of completely different quality. And that is exactly why so many people always reserve a little space in the July garden for this crop. 9. Brussels sprouts, the longer you wait, the more worthwhile they become. If there is one crop on this list that tests a gardener's patience the most, it is Brussels sprouts. This is not a fast harvest vegetable. You will not see results in just a few weeks. Instead, the plant needs about 80 to 100 days to fully develop. That is also why July is such an important time. If you start too late, cold weather may arrive before the small sprouts along the stem have time to form. And all your effort may only give you a tall stalk with very few sprouts. But if you plant at the right time, the reward is absolutely worth it. Unlike many other vegetables, Brussels sprouts do not usually reach their best flavor before the weather turns cold. The real magic happens only after the first frost. To protect itself from the cold, the plant converts stored starches into natural sugars. As a result, sprouts that may have tasted slightly strong become sweeter, nuttier, and more flavorful. That is why many gardeners intentionally leave the plants in the garden for a while after frost instead of harvesting right away. They know that every cold spell makes the flavor a little better. However, if you want a successful Brussels sprouts crop, you need to give the plants enough space. This is one of the larger vegetables in the garden. Each plant should be spaced about 18 to 24 inches apart so it has enough light and good airflow. The plants also need soil that stays evenly moist. For months, Brussels sprouts form small buds along the stem. If the plants suffer from water stress during that time, yields can drop significantly. When choosing varieties, Long Island, Gustus, Tabby, and Dagan are all reliable choices for a midsummer planting. There is one thing many new growers often feel impatient about. They see other vegetables being harvested long before Brussels sprouts, while their plants still look like tall stalks with big leaves. But do not be disappointed too soon. This crop always rewards the gardener who knows how to wait. As the weather gets colder, the small sprouts will gradually fill out along the stem. And that is when you understand why so many people consider Brussels sprouts one of the best vegetables in the fall garden. 10. Lettuce. Do not let the heat fool you. If there is one vegetable that makes many people give up on planting in July, it is lettuce. Everyone knows lettuce likes cool weather, and that is why many people assume midsummer is an impossible time to grow it. But that is not entirely true. You can still harvest beautiful green lettuce even when temperatures are high. You just need to understand what the plant needs. The first thing to know is that lettuce is not afraid of July. It is afraid of too much heat. When exposed to prolonged hot weather, the plant quickly bolts. The leaves begin to turn bitter, and the overall quality drops very quickly. So instead of trying to fight the weather, create a cooler environment for the plants. A shade cloth with 50 to 70% coverage can make a huge difference. If you do not have shade cloth, you can also use the shade from taller plants. For example, the north side of a corn bed or under tomato trellises. The second thing many people do not know is right there in the seed. Unlike most other vegetables, lettuce seeds need light to germinate. That is why you should not bury them too deeply. Cover them with only a very thin layer of soil, about 1/4 inch, just enough to hold the seeds in place. If you plant them deeply like beans or corn, the seeds can sit in the soil and refuse to sprout. This is one of the most common mistakes when sowing lettuce in midsummer. After solving the temperature issue and the seeding depth, the next step is choosing the right variety. Heat-tolerant varieties such as Buttercrunch, Summertime, Skyphos, or Salanova Butterhead will keep growing in conditions where many ordinary lettuce varieties have already begun to bolt. That is why they are always preferred for midsummer sowing. It is fair to say that lettuce requires a little more care. You need shade. You need to sow the seeds correctly, and you need to choose the right variety. But if you can do those three things, the reward is worth it. While many people think it is too late to grow a beautiful bed of lettuce, your garden can still keep producing crisp, fresh green leaves for weeks. 11. Radishes. In just a few weeks, you can start harvesting. If you are looking for one vegetable that gives the fastest results after sowing in July, radishes are hard to beat. While many other crops are still developing leaves or roots, radishes can already be ready to harvest. Depending on the variety, you may only need about 25 to 40 days from sowing to pulling the first roots. That is why this crop always has a special place in the late season garden. But speed is not its only advantage. What makes radishes special is that you do not need to sow them all at once. Instead, sow a small row about 1 or 2 weeks later. sow another row. Keep doing that through July and August. You will always have fresh radishes to harvest instead of dealing with one large crop all at once. This is one of the simplest techniques for extending the harvest, and many gardeners use it every year. Once you reach late July, you can also consider another option, winter radishes, such as daikon. These varieties need more time to mature, but in return, they grow through the cool weather of fall, forming large roots that can store much longer. There is also something interesting that not everyone knows. If the weather is too hot and the radish roots refuse to size up properly, do not pull the whole plant in frustration. Let the plants keep growing. When they flower, those flowers will produce green seed pods. Those young pods are completely edible. They are crisp, mildly spicy, and delicious raw or stir-fried with other vegetables. Not only that, the flowers also attract many bees and pollinating insects into the garden. What seems like a failed crop can sometimes give you a completely different kind of harvest. If you are looking for varieties to sow in July, German, Giant, Fireball, and Perfecto are all worth trying. Another advantage of radishes is that you do not need to worry too much when the weather begins to cool. The plants can keep growing until the ground truly freezes. You could say this is one of the easiest vegetables for anyone who wants to extend the growing season, because even when things do not go exactly as planned, this plant often still gives you some kind of reward. And sometimes these forgiving crops are the ones that make gardening so much more enjoyable. 12. Swiss chard, the vegetable that is almost impossible to fail with. And we are going to end today's list with one of the most reliable vegetables you can sow in July. If I had to choose the easiest vegetable on this entire list, I would choose Swiss chard. Not because it grows the fastest, and not because it produces the highest yield, but because this is a vegetable that keeps quietly growing, no matter how the weather changes. While many leafy greens begin to struggle in the heat, Swiss chard keeps growing. When the weather turns cold late in the season, it keeps growing. That is rare for a leafy green. Its ability to handle both ends of the temperature range makes Swiss chard a perfect choice for the late season garden. Compare it with other familiar greens. Lettuce can bolt quickly in hot weather. Spinach can send up a seed stalk and turn bitter after just a few warm spells. But Swiss chard is barely affected. It simply keeps pushing new leaves up from the center of the plant. That is why many gardeners consider it one of the most dependable vegetables in the garden. You also do not need to harvest the entire plant at once. Just pick the larger outer leaves. The center will continue producing new leaves. A few days later, you can come back and harvest again. That cycle repeats week after week, almost all through fall. If you like tender young leaves for salad, you can begin harvesting after about 30 days. If you want larger leaves for sautéing, soups, or cooking like spinach, let the plant grow for about 40 to 60 days. One of the reasons Swiss chard is loved is not just its flavor, it is also its appearance. Colorful stem varieties like Bright Lights can turn a garden bed into a display of red, yellow, orange, and pink. From a distance, they can look more like a patch of flowers than a vegetable bed. If productivity is your priority, Fort Hook Giant is a very good choice. If you want color and beauty in the garden, Bright Lights or Ruby Red will bring more visual appeal. When sowing, plant the seeds about 1 inch deep. Once the seedlings come up, thin them so each plant is about 6 inches apart. That spacing gives the plants enough room to grow large, healthy leaves. And perhaps what I like most about Swiss chard is this. It is not the kind of vegetable that shocks you with one huge harvest after only a few weeks. Instead, it quietly gives you basket after basket of fresh greens, again and again. While many other plants have already finished for the season, Swiss chard keeps growing, keeps producing leaves, and keeps holding its place in the garden. Perhaps that is also why it deserves to be the final crop on today's list. Because after all the plants that need the right timing, the right temperature, or the first frosts before they reach their best flavor, Swiss chard reminds us of something very simple. Sometimes, the most worthwhile crop is not the one that gives the biggest harvest. It is the one that is always there, steadily growing alongside you until the gardening season truly comes to an end. So, we have just gone through 12 of the best vegetables to plant in July. Some can be harvested in just a few weeks. Some will stay with you all through fall. And some only reach their best flavor after the first frosts arrive. But all of them have one thing in common. July is not the end of the gardening season. It is the time to begin a completely new crop. A crop with fewer pests, more comfortable weather, and harvests that can stretch all the way to the end of the year. I hope today's list helps you choose the right crops for your own garden. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to hit like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next gardening video. And I would also love to hear from you. Thank you so much for watching. I wish you a healthy, thriving garden and a truly abundant harvest. I'll see you in the next video.